Hey, I'm Lucia Morris, principal of MNL.com, a financing solutions company. And our goal is to help real estate investor and small business entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. I've been in the trenches. I have almost 2 decades of experience as an entrepreneur and grew a niche business from ground zero. We've secured financing for investors and business owners from $25,000 to $5 million plus. Our investor financing programs include fixed flip, rental property, multifamily, commercial, and blanket financing. Also, we offer an owner occupied commercial financing product from 90% to 100% LTV. Today, our focus will be on our nationwide ground up construction financing program. Before we get into construction financing, I want to share with you a specific type of loan that we closed for real estate investors in the last quarter of 2017. These loans are personal, unsecured line of credit and term loan for investors who needed a smaller amount of cash to purchase and or rehab properties. As you can see in the slide, closed transactions include the first line of credit for a New Jersey investor who received $35,000. Now this loan was closed in 10 days and he will pay an interest rate of 8.5%. His middle FICO score was 682. The FICO score criteria is having a middle FICO score of 670 or higher. By the way, the line of credit revolves. So when you draw down, let's say $25,000 from a $50,000 line of credit, your balance is $25,000, right? But after you repay the balance, it shoots back up to $50,000 or whatever the amount that you repay. So to learn more about these loans, please visit the link in the website. So without any further ado, the next voice you will hear will be our presenter of the Ground Up Construction Program. Thank you.
So we'll jump into construction. As with all the webinars, we'll do kind of a one-slide high-level overview of the product so you know the key points. Then we'll jump into borrower underwriting, property underwriting, and then we'll have a slide that talks about what do we see frequently but just doesn't fit the box. And then we'll tie it up with how do you get in touch with us, how do you submit a deal. We'll go over that process. So for the construction product, again, it's housed under the fix and flip umbrella. All of our short-term kind of non-rental products are. We'll finance both lot acquisition and construction. So if you have a client who's wanting to buy a lot and then build on it, we'll finance 90% of the lot as long as it's fully platted, all of the horizontal work is already finished, and then we'll finance 90% of the construction budget. So it operates very similar to the standard fix and flip rehab where we're financing 90% of the property, 90% of the rehab. In this case, you're just swapping out an existing structure with a fully platted lot, and then a construction budget as opposed to kind of a tear out and rehab budget. It's a 13-month term, interest-only balloon note, so your borrower is only going to make interest payments throughout the term. We start at 7.99%, so it will be anywhere from 8 to 12. 8 is going to be a client who's doing 15 or more a year and has a solid track record of within the past year acquiring, rehabbing, or building and then disposing of the property. Someone who's going to be at 12% is going to be your brand new flipper, never flipped a property before or never built before, and then or if they maybe only have experience with one. And real quick, we got our first question that came in throughout the webinar. Feel free to ask questions. Once we wrap up the underwriting details, at the very end, we'll go through all the questions that haven't been addressed already, and then I'll stay on for a bit after just to answer questions as they come in. Lender fee on construction. Construction doesn't fall under the 1 to 1.25 pricing. It's going to be 2 to 2.5. There's a little more due diligence involved on a project where there's a piece of land and then it's going to be a vertical construction. Then there is where you have an existing structure. It's a little riskier, and few nationwide lenders offer construction financing. We do. We don't have kind of a geographic cap on it, so we'll finance in Alabama, California, New York, Connecticut. Everywhere we lend, we'll do construction loans. And then about 2 weeks to close for new clients. A couple questions. Is this for single family or can it be used for duplexes? It's for both. So SFRs, 1 to 4 unit properties will do. So anything over 4 units, we do not have a product for ground up construction for multifamily 5+ unit properties, but this product is for 1 to 4 unit properties. And then a question about mixed use or commercial. Neither would fall under here. We just want to do 1 to 4 unit non-owner occupied residential properties. And then one more question and we'll move on to borrower underwriting. How many loans can one borrower do simultaneously? For instance, if they have 4 lots, can they do them at the same time? There's no formal cap. We do want to see that they have sufficient reserves for the current deal they're trying to do, plus any outstanding deals they have with us. It's going to be based on kind of borrower strength. So if it's a brand new borrower who's never built a property before, we're likely not going to extend credit for multiple deals. We want to see them build some kind of track record before we'll go on multi-deal exposure. All right, so the 2 options. If a client owns the lot free and clear, then we can look at financing 100% of the budget. So they'll only bring down fees associated with the loan. So to have that happen, they need to have purchased the lot for at least 15% of the loan amount. So say they're looking to build a property and it's going to cost $100,000 to build that property. 15% of 100 is going to be 15, so they need to have bought the lot for at least $15,000. Otherwise, if it's less than that, they'll just bring down the difference between what they paid for the lot and the 15%. That'll be there to establish their skin in the game. And then if they're acquiring the lot and building, so they don't own the lot already, they're purchasing it, they'll just bring down 10% of the lot cost plus 10% of the budget. So on to borrower underwriting. We have a 600 credit minimum, 6 months of interest payments for reserves. We'll need to see that. We'll also need to see 10% of the budget for reserves for startup costs. We'll dive into our inspection process and how draws work a little bit later. But one thing is that we don't want to wipe them out at the closing table so they don't have any funds after closing to get work going on the property, because then it becomes a chicken and egg situation. We have the money in escrow for them, but we only release it after they've completed work. So we underwrite them to have a modest amount of the budget ready for startup so they can get work going and then make their first draw. Part of construction, and this is a relatively new process for those of you who have worked with us. A couple of months ago, we partnered with a company to conduct some due diligence on the entity that's going to be completing the project. So usually the general contractor. It's a contractor review process. There's a 5-day turnaround. It's a $150 fee. It's going to vet the contractor's experience, licensing, and insurance. So they're going to look at projects they've worked on, vendors they've worked with, and then make sure their licensing is squared away where they're operating, then make sure they're insured properly. So if anything happens on a job site, they're not going to be put in a precarious situation. Once a contractor has moved through this process, they are good to go for 12 months. So they don't have to go through it again. And that's if they're working with one borrower and then happen to pop up on another deal with another borrower. If they've already been cleared, then they're good to go for 12 months. As part of this process, we'll just need to collect a couple items from the contractor. We'll need to get their license. will need to get their driver's license, and then a W-9, workers' comp policy, and then commercial general liability, so proof of that. It is a one sheet, so it's not a in-depth process. It's just very high level, check a few boxes. On all of the approval emails highlighted at the bottom, it says ground up construction, click here, and once you click that link it's going to take you to this sheet, and front and back it's going to relay everything we touched on here. So what information we need from the contractor, and then what documents are needed. So on property underwriting, it runs very similar to kind of our standard fix and flip rehab project. We'll look for 1 to 4 unit non-owner occupied properties. So again, we don't lend to anything owner occupied. We'll order 1004 or 1025 appraisal depending on the type of structure. And then there will be a budget inspection. This is going to say to review the plans for the project and make sure that the borrower isn't missing anything there. So if they have $150,000 budget and the inspector starts to look through it and says you'll have a gorgeous house except for the fact that there won't be a roof because it wasn't listed in here, of course that's an extreme example, but there are some much smaller, very important things that can be forgotten in the process of making a budget. So this just really helps cover the borrower to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row whenever they're looking to build a property. And then there's a project feasibility review. This kind of goes with the contractor review. It's one final step, and it's just to ensure that the budget's squared away, that what they're building is feasible and is going to fit into the area they're looking to build. Just making sure that before they jump on this raw plot of land to build a structure, that everything's squared away. Construction management team on one side of the office, and all they do is work with borrowers on projects for draws. So your clients will have a point of contact here, and they will work with them hand in hand as they go through the construction process on getting draws processed. So that's one process that we keep internal just for quality control. We know that draw processes can be a huge pain point with a lot of lenders, and we never want that to happen. We want to provide the absolute quickest service possible, so that's why we keep it in-house. Again, funds are released for completed work. So kind of use this example on the fix and flip rehab. If an inspector goes into the property and the borrower put down $5,000 for kitchen cabinets, the inspector goes in and sees $5,000 worth of kitchen cabinets, but they're just sitting on the floor, your client's not going to get their money for that. The inspector wants to see that those cabinets were mounted to the property so nobody can just walk off with them as soon as he or she leaves. So it's going to be released for completed work. $150 per draw, and that's not per line item, that's per the inspector going out to the property. So each time the inspector goes out, it's $150. There's no minimum or maximum on the number of items that the client has to draw down for. So they could draw down for one big item, or they could draw down for 50 small items. But it's a $150 fee. That's across the board. We've negotiated that to kind of keep it uniform across our lending area. And again, part of keeping it in-house, part of having quality control with our inspectors is that it allows us to ensure a quick turnaround. So it's going to be about a 3-day turnaround start to finish. Some markets, for instance our Atlanta market, it can sometimes be quicker. There are other markets throughout the country that can be extremely fast. But even kind of worst case scenario, you're looking at about 3 days. On construction, so this differs from our rehab product a little bit. Rehab, they can make draws anytime for anything. There's nothing dictating how they make draws. For construction, just to make sure that the project goes smoothly, we have a couple points where they're going to have to make draw requests. So one is going to be after the permitting phase. The next is after the foundation's poured and squared away. And then you have a pre- and post-drywall inspection. And then after the project's completed, of course, a final inspection to go ahead and pull final money out of the escrow account before they go ahead and sell it off. A couple things that are outside the box. Now, I mentioned before we have a box here. It's our defined underwriting box, and I can tell you that if it meets our underwriting criteria, we are going to fund it. But on the flip side of that is if it's outside of that box, we're not going to fund it. Developments. We do not finance construction for development. So if somebody is looking to build, 50, 100, 150 homes, that's not our cup of tea. We're looking for infill projects, maybe a batch of projects near each other, that's fine. But once you get into full development subdivision, that's not something that fits our box. We don't finance condos under fix and flip. We do finance condos under our rental products, but not under fix and flip. So if a condo needs rehab or if they're looking to build condos, it's not going to be a fit for us. Property is greater than 2 acres, and this applies to fix and flip and rental. Does not fit the box. If you have a GC, no experience, no real measurable experience, that could be an issue on the contractor vetting process. And then inexperienced foreign nationals. Foreign nationals for us need to be at least tier 2. So 2 or more flips or builds within the last 2 years. If they have less than that, then as soon as they hit the experience mark, we can work with them, but until that point, we're unable to work with them. If you have questions or would like to stick around for a minute and hear the questions other folks have, I'd encourage you to do so. We always get a lot of really good questions coming out of this, so we will jump into it now. So one question, is there a limitation as to the ratio of purchase price to construction cost? There is not. Minimum and maximum funding. So minimum loan amount, we don't have a formal minimum, but anything under $50,000 for loan amount is going to get extra scrutiny. Deals of that size tend to be a lot trickier, both in financing and then kind of on the success rate. So we want to kind of take a closer look at deals that are under $50,000. Another question about reserves. So again, 6 months of interest-only payments, 10% of the budget for startup costs, broker fee, lender fee. That's what we want to see for reserves. And if they come back for a new deal while they have a deal outstanding with us, we want to see those items for the new deal, and we also want to see the 6 months of interest-only payment reserves in addition for any previous deals they've closed. A question about seller financing. We do not allow seller financing for any of our products, so that wouldn't be a fit. And then if lot loan, do they have to begin construction within a specified period of time, or can they purchase without construction plans? It's a really good question. So we are only going to finance a lot purchase if we also have plans and specs and a full budget for the construction. The idea is that as soon as we close out the loan, after they get everything permitted, that they hit the ground running on building the property. We don't have a product that just lends solely for the acquisition of a lot. We want to always be lending on both lot and ready-to-go construction. Can you finance manufactured homes on a foundation? We do not finance manufactured modular homes under any product. Question, do you have promotional items for line of credit product? We do not. So the way line of credit works is we're going to look at kind of the whole holistic profile of the borrower, their entity, what kind of work they've done, what volume they've done, and then we will price them based on that experience. So line of credit is really detailed case-by-case pricing. And then another good question, does the line apply only to 1 to 4, or can they use it for multifamily? It's only going to apply to 1 to 4 units. So multifamily financing is going to be for one-offs. If a house is on a piece of property larger than 2.5 acres, you will not fund it, question mark? Correct. Anything over 2 acres, we are unable to fund. It just becomes much trickier, especially on the appraisal side and on a resale side, should we ever have to take the property back. If it's barely over, if it's like 2.05 or something that's just barely creeping above 2, we can take a look at it. But if it's 2.2, 2.3 on up, it's just not going to be a fit for us. Do you fund horizontal work like sewage, stuff like that? We do not. We want to see all horizontal work completed, fully platted lot that is ready to go into vertical after we close out. Another good question, pretty much asking about gap financing. So can a client have gap financing in order to cover reserves or down payment? We do not allow secondary financing unless someone already qualifies. The trigger there is, of course, that most people who do qualify aren't going to be using secondary financing. So for all intents and purposes, secondary financing just doesn't mesh with our product. The question about allowing a lot split to 2 builds on one large lot, or does it have to have a separate APN number? We want to have one structure per parcel ID. So thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks for joining us today for the Ground Up Construction Financing Program. If you have any questions, please contact Lathea Morris at 973-509-1903, extension 1 pound, or send me an email, Lathea, Lathea, at morlinoandlathea.com. Thanks so much for attending, and have a wonderful day.